boilerplate, good is fine, get it out of your system, but we're going to be polite and courteous to our guests. Because he's our guest. I hope you'll be able to proceed without being interrupted.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. About 6-7 months ago, I was teaching at another American campus on sabbatical when I got a call from the Prime Minister of Israel. Would you want to come back to Jerusalem and discuss the possibility about representing the State of Israel to the United States? And going back, meeting the Prime Minister, accepting the position, Prime Minister then looked at me and shook his head rather ruefully and said, we're going to give this one more time. Can I say something? We have an opportunity here to exchange ideas. You have an opportunity to hear a different perspective. This is why you have come to this campus as students. You haven't come to this campus to hear one idea. You've come to hear a multiplicity of ideas. It's a humble suggestion. It is one of the inestimable values of education in this country, that you have that opportunity. Don't squander the opportunity. And so the Prime Minister shook his head ruefully and said, for some reason that I can't fathom, "Or are you going to have a hard job?" And then later I met the Foreign Minister of Israel. Those of you who know him.
Member here for 26 years. I have been a faculty member here for 26 years. This is no way for our undergraduate students to behave. We have the opportunity to hear from a policymaker relevant to one of the most important issues facing this planet, and you are preventing not only yourself from hearing him, but hundreds of other people in this room and hundreds of other people in an overflow room. Shame on you. This is not an example of free speech. I strongly suggest that those of you who are intent on disrupting this event, now that you've made your point, stand up and leave and let people into the room who want to hear the ambassador speak. If people want to embarrass themselves, they can do so elsewhere. I have worked very hard to put on this event out of respect for the process of what it means to be at a university. This is not Jerusalem, in addition to it not being the British Parliament or a street corner. This is Irvine, California. You have a point of view. We would all appreciate it if you would ask good questions. And as the person who's going to call on people, I guarantee that if you raise your hand, I will allow you to ask a question when the ambassador has finished speaking. Ambassador.
It's not London, it's not Jerusalem, but it's also not Tehran. And so, the foreign minister, not known for being queasy, looks at me and says, "Oi, are you going to have a hard job?"
Shame on all of you! You did nothing to enhance the reputation of this campus. All you did today was embarrass yourself and the university. And if
So first, let me thank everyone who's come and say how much we appreciate having you here on campus and how much I am looking forward to hearing from the ambassador, and I know that all of us were. I know the ambassador is also very concerned about being able to have a productive and positive discussion, raising issues that are important to talk about. As the professor said, free speech is something that we value. We do not value heckling. We do not value those who don't share our values of respect and being able to listen to other people. I would say that the ambassador and those who are with him will make a decision about his ability to come back, and I'll be able to let you know about that in just a moment. We'll do what we can. But I just want to say how embarrassed I am on behalf of our entire university at the disruptions that you've heard tonight. I mean, they're inappropriate. Let me just say that what I would like to do is I hope that we could proceed with the evening. It will not be our choice; it'll be the choice of the others. We will go and see what we can do if you'll just hang with us for a moment. And let me again thank you for your patience and for your interest in this. I was looking forward to a very interesting evening. I will see if we can proceed or not. And give me just a minute, okay? Thank you. We were here for an academic presentation. We have 1,000 of these a year, and we're proud that when we have academic presentations, we allow people to be heard. We cannot, we will not, we do not tolerate disruptions of academic freedom of the type that have occurred here earlier today, and we cannot, as a university, exist with that type of behavior. It is antithetical to everything that we stand for and everything that we are. There is no university without a free exchange of ideas. We all know that. I care deeply about higher education. I care deeply about this university. I care deeply about the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. We must respect those freedoms or else they are taken away from us. My hope, I understand that we have many disagreements, and the ability to come together and discuss those disagreements is one of those great freedoms that does not exist in many areas of the world, and we know that very well. My hope is that we have the judgment and the class to welcome people who will come and share their ideas with us so that we can respond and learn from them. And we, as a university, will have to deal most directly and specifically with anyone in our midst who does not abide by the values and principles and policies which have made us a great university. This is an important time for us. And we are eager to be able to proceed. We would love very much to go forward. Professor Petraka is going to make a comment. I want to join the audience and listen where I believe is my appropriate place this evening. I'm going to do that, and I would say that, again, the principles of this university and the values that support who we have become have been violated this evening that is inappropriate and intolerable for us. Thank you.
The university is not an anarchy, certainly not the University of California. The University of California is a massive bureaucracy, and in this large bureaucracy, there are rules that are laid down and expectations articulated clearly in a variety of codes of conduct. There is a code of conduct that governs the faculty. There is a code of conduct that governs students. Any student that has to be removed from this room because they are violating that code of conduct is going to be subject to disciplinary proceedings by the appropriate procedures on this campus. We're wasting time. We're wasting time. One of those procedures can result in suspension or dismissal from the university.
I want to add one more thing. Yes, we all know about the right of free speech in America, and especially on American campuses, but there's something else here. Now, I spent most of my life living in and studying the Middle East, and one of the great and eternal cultural facets of the Middle East is hospitality. When you invite somebody into your house, even if you do not agree with them, even if they're ostensibly your enemy, once you have invited them into your house, you are their hosts, and they are your guests. I'm your guest here, and I'm asking for the Middle Eastern hospitality to your guests. I've come into your house. You are my host. I'm asking for hospitality. Now, I'm thinking to myself, why would this be such a hard job? I had spent much of the previous 3 decades studying the history of America's involvement in the Middle East, particular emphasis on the evolution of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I knew that the origins of that relationship went very, very far back, close to 400 years to the first...
You can tell the call.
Another one. Hey, get him out! Protects Arab and Muslim events and won't protect this one.
First Puritan establishment on this continent, the Puritans, of course, were people who came to this country for the very rights that you cherish today, the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression. And they came to this country fleeing from oppression in their native England, and they saw themselves as the new Jews. They saw this country as the new promised land, which is why if you go to the East Coast particularly, you've got 1,000 towns and city names that have Hebrew names. You have your Sharons and your Jerichos and your Bethlehems and your Jerusalems. And they gave their children Hebrew names, the Davids and the Sarahs and the Rebeccas. They made Hebrew a mandatory language at their colleges. I don't know what it is at UCI, but Hebrew was a mandatory language at Princeton, and James Madison failed it. They almost made Moses the national symbol of the United States. Some other people wanted that bald eagle. Moses was almost the symbol of the United States, and the symbol of Moses leading the children of Israel out of bondage into the Promised Land was designed by Thomas Jefferson and by Benjamin Franklin. That's how closely identified the founding fathers and mothers of this country were with the biblical narrative. And many of these founding mothers and fathers concluded that to be good Americans, it was their divinely ordained duty.
It is a shame that this university has sponsored the best person like yourself!
As good Americans, it was their divinely ordained duty to help these Jews get back to their ancestral biblical homeland in the land of Israel. John Adams, the second president of the United States, was up here. He'd be giving the same speech I have been giving. John Adams said it was his most ardent wish that 100,000 Jews would march back into Judea and reclaim it as a Judean Jewish kingdom. Abraham Lincoln in 1863 said it was his wish that the Jewish people could reclaim their homeland and their ancient land, and that he personally pledged to help realize that dream once he restored America's unity after the Civil War. The notion of America was indistinguishable for leading Americans throughout generations from the notion of a recreated Jewish homeland. It was the case for Woodrow Wilson. It was the case for Harry Truman, who made the United States the first nation on earth to recognize the recreated Jewish homeland. That there was a deep spiritual connection between these two countries. And there's a reason why. You know, between 67 and 71% of this country, by any poll, defines itself as pro-Israel. Among churchgoers, it's about 82% of the country. Very deep roots that go back to close to 400 years. But then in 1948, a Jewish state was recreated. It came into being as a democratic state. It came into being as the only state in the Middle East in which free speech is guaranteed unto this day. And that communality of democratic values, respect for the rule of law, became another major fabric in this component, in this weave of the U.S.-Israel relationship. But it wasn't a strategic relationship. The United States did not provide Israel with military aid, not a single bullet. 1967, there was a war, the Six-Day War. Israel fought that war, prevailed in that war without American military aid, but in the aftermath of the war, American policymakers woke up and said, whoa, there's a major military power in the Middle East and we're not allied with it, we should be allied with it. And thus was born the U.S.-Israel Strategic Alliance. Today, some 42 and a half years later, the U.S.-Israel relationship, and I say this without any equivocation, the U.S.-Israel relationship is the most multifaceted, multi-layered, deepest alliance that this country has had with any foreign nation in its post-World War II period. So with all that, why then was my Prime Minister, my Foreign Minister, and the person who signed it?
You sir are a brother. Get out of here!
Chief Hennessy, if this is correct, that in addition to proceedings regarding violation of the Academic Code of Conduct, because this behavior has now become disruptive, the individuals who are leaving the office, leaving the room, Chief Hennessy, are also being arrested. I know that it's midterm week for students on the campus, and you might want to spend it in your dormitory room
Instead of in jail,
studying for obvious reasons. Ambassador?
Why, with a 400-year history of a spiritual relationship, a 62-year relationship of democratic values, a 42-and-a-half-year history of strategic interests, fighting first against communism, later against religious extremism, why would I be having a difficult job as ambassador? And the fact of the matter is, if you looked at the situation of what had happened politically in this country, American people had gone to the polls. They had elected a new president, Barack Hussein Obama, and an administration that was generally seen as center-left. And the Israeli people had gone to the polls, and they had elected Ed. They elected a government which was... Sorry. מקווה שתענני. מה? אתה חייב לי משהו. Had elected a government in Israel that was generally right and center-right, though it had some leftist elements in the form of the Labor Party. So already you had a divergence of governments that were going in different directions. But there was also potential for major divisions between the American and Israeli government for the first time in a long time, along some very crucial issues to both countries. There was a question of the two-state solution, the creation of a Palestinian state that would serve as the homeland for the Palestinian people, live alongside the Jewish state of Israel in permanent peace. And the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed that no Israeli should be ruling over Palestinians. We wanted the Palestinians to enjoy all those rights that are consonant with independence, with sovereignty, save those rights that could harm Israel. Basically, armies. We wanted the Palestinian state, if and when it came into being, to be a state that would recognize Israel as a permanent and legitimate Jewish neighbor, as we would recognize the Palestinian state as a permanent and legitimate Palestinian neighbor. Now, the Obama administration wanted to move very, very swiftly on this, was thinking there was some talk of a 2-year deadline, and we were concerned that these major caveats, the potential threat posed by this state, and that the two-state solution would not bring about an end of claims and an end of conflict would not be met. There was also the more specific question of the Israeli Jewish communities in what we call Judea and Samaria and what much of the world calls the West Bank. And there are, of course, deep divisions about these communities within Israel itself. But the fact of the matter is that a large segment of the Israeli public, and again, we are a democracy, views these lands as the inalienable patrimony, as the gift to the Jewish people. They literally are tribal lands. And no Israeli government had the ability or the right to give them up. Moreover, we're talking about several 100,000 citizens of the State of Israel who have normal lives. If you were to freeze construction in the city of Irvine, California, it would be very, very difficult. People have babies. They wanted to build a room for the baby. They wanted to build a nursery, a clinic. We held that they should have the ability to do that. The Obama administration, by contrast, wanted a utter, complete settlement construction freeze, both in the West Bank as well as in East Jerusalem. So there was a potential for a divergence there. And finally, and most potentially divergent, was the positions on Iran. The Obama administration came into office extending a hand to the Iranian leadership without preconditions in an attempt to induce by diplomatic means the Iranian regime to suspend the enrichment of uranium on their soil, to suspend what we all believed was an Iranian intention to create nuclear weapons that could threaten Israel and the entire Middle East. We were concerned about this. We would be concerned about this. Yo. בלי שאלות. בסך זה לא, it's not over yet, by the way. It's over yet. We're going to meet guys out.
More exciting to Jeez, if I would have known that they would have left 38 questions, I could have gotten out of the way 20 minutes ago.
Excuse me. Hi. I know they're going to think this is strange, but I really wish they had stayed. I appreciate you all, but it was that community I wanted to address as well. Important that they hear, as I listen to them in Washington. We were worried about the Iranian issue. Iran poses not one, but multiple existential threats to Israel. Not just the threat of putting a nuclear warhead on top of a missile, and the Iranians have an abundance of these missiles that can hit any city in the state of Israel, but also that Iran could pass on that technology to Hezbollah, to Hamas, its proxy terrorist groups. That once Iran acquired nuclear military capabilities, then other Middle Eastern states were going to acquire military nuclear capabilities, and very, very quickly we'd find ourselves inhabiting a profoundly unstable nuclear neighborhood, a tinderbox that could go off at any given time. So here was the greatest potential for diversions between the Obama position of outreach and engagement and our deep concern that as the clock spun, so too did centrifuges in Tehran churning out enriched uranium. So, hence my Prime Minister shaking his head at me and telling me I had a difficult job. But I've seen over the course of the last 7-8 months how two governments that came into all of these issues with different perspectives, how we have worked together to iron out almost all of our differences, and how we have come to see the issues confronting both the United States and Israel in the Middle East almost identical on the same page. On the two-state solution, the Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a speech in Israel last June in which he set out not preconditions for the creation of a Palestinian state, but two caveats. One caveat was, as mentioned, that the Palestinian state comes into being as a demilitarized state. That doesn't mean it can't have security forces. We are working very closely with American-trained Palestinian security forces that have now deployed in 4 West Bank cities and have enabled the Israeli Defense Forces to remove from those cities. And that's a great accomplishment, but we did not want the Palestinian state to have missiles that could rain down on our population centers as they've rained down from Gaza and from Lebanon. We did not want the Palestinian state to have an air force that could shoot down our airliners coming in and out of Ben Gurion Airport. We did. Iran poses a threat not to Israel and the Middle East, but to its own people. And through the development of the missile project, the Iranians threatened the French, who are now coming within missile range, and the Italians. And then finally, last fall, the revelation of a secret facility at Qom, a nuclear enrichment process which could have no civilian use. It could only have been a military site. And the rejection of a very generous offer, a compromise offer by the international community to the Iranians, by the Iranian community. Just today they rejected it again and said that they are unilaterally now, without permission from the International Atomic Energy Agency, they are going to start upgrading their enrichment of low-enriched uranium to potential weapons grade. All this we have gone through. I was in the Oval Office when President Obama made 3 pledges to Prime Minister Netanyahu. President pledged to the Prime Minister of Israel that if the sanctions did not succeed in compelling or impelling the Iranians to desist from enriching uranium, then all options would remain on the table. This is happening right now as we speak. Right now, in the Security Council, there is discussion on a 4th round of sanctions resolution that will put teeth in it, and we're going to see over the next few months whether these sanctions can work. There are many questions. We do not know the degree to which the Russians will cooperate. We do not know the degree to which the Chinese will cooperate. But one thing is certain, that the United States and Israeli position on Iran, which could have been a point of great tension between us, has been removed, and now we see virtually entirely eye to eye on the Iranian issue. I remember, I told you earlier that I had spent many, many years researching and writing about the U.S.-Israel relationship and thought I knew a lot about it. And then I got into this job and found out that I knew, in fact, very little. And in fact, what I thought was this multi-layered, multifaceted, deep relationship was, in fact, much deeper, much more multifaceted than anything I had ever conceived of before. And yes, it's the military dimension where, several weeks ago, there were 1,400 American servicewomen and men training in Israel on a series of anti-ballistic weapon systems that will defend not only the skies over Israel to an unprecedented degree in human history, but also defend American servicemen and women fighting and serving throughout the Middle East. It is intelligence sharing. It is training. It is all of those areas in the military sphere, but it is not just the military sphere. Do you know that Israel is America's 20th largest customer in the world? That the United States does more business with the state of Israel than it does with Saudi Arabia, more business with Israel than it does with Argentina, more business than it does with Israel than it does with Russia. We're an economic interest for this country. Israel has more companies represented on the NASDAQ exchange than any other country in the world with the exception of the United States. And we have more scientific patents, more scientific papers, and more Nobel Prize winners than any other country in the world per capita. We cooperate on issues that never reach the newspaper. Trust me on this. And we cooperate on three of the most important initials in the U.S.-Israel relationship, QME, Qualitative Military Edge. QME is the promise made by successive American administrations, going back some years, to assure that Israel has a qualitative military edge over any one potential military adversary in the Middle East or any combination of military adversaries in the Middle East. It's an historic undertaking. And the Obama administration, recognizing that much of our QME has been eroded by arms sales to the Middle East over recent years, is now working very, very seriously together with us to redress the imbalance in Israel's QME. We are united in fighting reports such as the Goldstone Report, which seek to deny Israel the right to defend itself and ultimately even the right to exist. And the administration's condemnation of Goldstone was every bit as categorical as ours. Very, 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 very inspiring for me personally. Do we agree on everything? We do not. Let me be very candid and upfront about this. No two allies agree on anything. Anybody who reads history, as I did, and look at the British-American relationship during World War II, one of the great alliances of all times, will know that even the closest of allies can disagree. The great litmus of any alliance is not whether you agree on everything. The great litmus of every alliance is how you deal with the discrepancies between you. And I have seen on an hourly basis, not a daily basis, an hourly basis, how the United States government and the government of Israel have approached all of these issues and have agreed, in an amazing extent, have agreed and seen eye to eye and have moved forward. We face historic challenges. We face historic challenges, as I've mentioned before, in the search for peace, in defending Israel against charges of or attempts to delegitimize Jewish statehood. And we face that challenge in the form of a rapidly nuclearizing Iran. Historic challenges. But there is nothing that I have seen in the last 7-8 months of my being on this job that would lead me to doubt, even for a second, that the U.S.-Israel relationship will remain resilient, remain robust, and will be capable of overcoming any and all of these challenges. This is a relationship that goes back not 42 years, not 62 years. It goes back nearly 400 years to the first Puritan presence on the Massachusetts shore. It is one of the great alliances in all history, and I am profoundly grateful to the American people who have made that alliance and to its government. Thank you very much.
The ambassador needs to leave. I'd ask everybody to stay seated. On behalf of my department and the university, I want to make sure to thank you. I'd particularly like to thank you for your patience, and I'd like to thank the ambassador for his perseverance. Give me a few minutes. Chance of grace.
The ambassador has to leave, as you know, and I'm sorry that the disruptions made that necessary. I want to say something to this audience, though, that I think is very important. We have a large and diverse community. I went to medical school to become an eye doctor, and I'm wondering sometimes how I get into this. Wondering that a few minutes ago. What I want to say is this, that something is very, very important to me. I am so pleased and proud of the courage of the ambassador and for what he did tonight to stand up for peace. I appreciate fully the fact that we have different points of view. We can have polar points of view that that never can come together. But what we stand for as a university is allowing those voices to be heard. And I think that the ambassador's willingness to come back after the disruptions and say, no speech will prevail. Hecklers will not prevail. Repression will not prevail. Was a great moment for us, and I really do appreciate and want to thank him for that. And then I also want to say something to you, the community. I don't know many of you personally. I work here on campus with our students and faculty. But I want you to know how important your support of us is to us as university, a part of the university family, but also to the Jewish students on this campus who are a strong and robust and essential part of who we are. And so what I always want is that when we have tensions, when we have disagreements, when we have these things that are difficult and I'll say offend me and embarrass me as they offend and embarrass you, what we would want is for you to continue to support us to help us work through it. We don't want the disruptors and the hecklers to win. We want to have a university that really can go forward with all of us. I hear, actually, the chants I'm hearing, I hear directed toward the administration for many other reasons. I mean, there's a ubiquitous series, and when I go to Regents meetings, they're directed toward the Regents. So I know these things that young people go through a process of expressing themselves in outrageous ways. And
What was going to happen to those who disrupted?
In this particular case, we've had 12 individuals that we've arrested for a penal code section which has to do with disrupting a public event on university grounds. It's a misdemeanor. We're going to be processing those arrests, and we'll be submitting them to the district attorney's office for consideration of filing the charges.
Why wasn't there more of a deterrence between the disruptive section and the stage to be a visual deterrence? You had no police in between the disruptive section. They had no cops in their line of view. Was that a conscious choice?
No, to the contrary, we did. We had plainclothes and uniformed police officers that were up in the front. So we felt that we had sufficient security in terms of dealing with that. We anticipated the likelihood of some sort of interaction such as what we had here. We need to have our uniformed presence here so that we could deal with them immediately.
What was
the point is that we, as Jews, have to stand up with pride. And the idea of America was that we left the swords at the door. And apparently the Muslim Student Union believes that violence is a political alternative. And we, as American Jews, believe in this country that we have to exchange ideas and debate, but we have to do it in a civil fashion, something they fail to understand.
Are you, Ambassador Oren, close to walking out?
I think he was considering it very, very seriously, but when the president of the university agreed also that they would talk about possibly expelling students, then he was willing to come back.
Do you believe that the head of security could have been tougher to preempt further interruptions after the first one?
My field is not security. I think they could have been more tougher, but I think the university should have made clear policy in advance that disruption would bring expulsion or the minimum suspension. That was a mistake on the university administration. I'm not a security expert. I think if the university is stronger in its policies of acting responsibly for those who are disruptive and putting them through a judicial review and considering acts like suspension and expulsion, you'll cause many of those people. There's nothing wrong with a student who disagrees with the ambassador to come and ask the question in a dignified way and disagree in a proper fashion. That's the concept of America. But to use force and intimidation is antithetical to the very principle of a university, which is supposed to be an expression and an exchange of diverse ideas.
We came from the Holy Land, from the land that we fight.
Okay.
He's a Jew, Israeli. I'm a Palestinian. You will laugh now if I answer your question, because I was born for a Muslim family. I was adopted by Orthodox Jew, and I was raised as a Catholic. Where? Back home, in Bethlehem, in Israel, in Palestine, you name it the way you want.
And what do you think of the way that the Muslim students behaved today?
See, first of all, I'm not defending Muslim student. This is improper behavior. Whomever behaved this, whether Israeli or Jewish or Muslim, whomever, this is not the proper behavior, okay? And this is not the Islam behavior. I studied the Islam for 3 years. I studied the Old Testament, the New Testament for 10 years. And in each religion, it says, sorry for that. It says negotiate, respect. And the reason in the Middle East we cannot reach a peace agreement because we have no respect. I can make and I can disagree with the ambassador in a proper way. Let him speak, let him finish his speak, and then I can ask him questions. I can push him to the corner by my questions, right? That's not the proper behavior, and I'm so sorry. I would say it as a Muslim, as a Palestinian, I'm so sorry for such behavior, and especially in UCI. And the last note I want to say, those kids, I call them kids, they were born here in America. The ambassador mentioned the hospitality of the Middle East. Because they were born here, they think this is the way to be an American, to be Americanized. This is not an American behavior too. They're wrong. This is not an American culture. It's what they're hearing from the extremist parties. I lost 2 of my brothers on the hand of the Israeli soldiers. And here's my hand to the killer of my brothers, said, let us make peace. Okay? I'm not calling for revenge.
So
from the house.
Do you think this campus has too tolerant an attitude towards this kind of agitation?
Well, unfortunately, I came maybe 3 years ago here. I came here 3 years ago, and I see the same hatred. The hatred in this university.
Where?
In this university, in the campus of Irvine, unfortunately, is growing.
You see it from whom?
Mainly from the Palestinian, or I would say not the Palestinian, from the Muslims. Because you can be a Muslim, you can be Indian, and you can be a Muslim. You can be Pakistani, a Muslim, you know. And I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, I was hoping after 3 years coming back here to see a different vision, to see respect, you know. I was going to leave the room because I feel shame for what I hear and what I see, you know. As I said, we can push the ambassador to the corner by our questions, not by shouting or saying bad, you know, or again,
You think the community bears some responsibility for tolerating this kind of hatefulness?
Yes, the community. Again, the main responsible for that is the home.
How about the mosque?
Home, mosque, not all of them, they go to the mosque. Not all of them. You can be a Muslim, you say I'm a Muslim, and you can be in a nightclub. That doesn't mean you take this from the mosque.
How about the...
And you can have it, you can check online, because I'm a member of the bereaved families. They call them in Hebrew the Mishpachot Shkolot, or Al-A'ilat Al-Thakla in the Arabic, the bereaved families. And that's how I became involved with the peace missions and peace organization. And if you ask me what I'm doing here, leaving behind me 3 kids for the last 5 years back home in Palestine, I'm a political refugee. I've been granted an asylum in this country.
In America?
In America.
By the American government?
Yes.
Because what would happen if you went back there, back to Palestine?
Because I was facing a life threat by the extremist religious Hamas. And that's why I'm here. So I paid the price on both sides. Israeli killed my brothers, Hamas wants to take my life.
Why is Hamas being so violent towards you?
Yes, they did, they do, and they still.
Why?
Because of my belief that I'm saying that the Jew have the right to exist and the Jew have the right to have their own state, which is Israel. And I said we have to share both sides. Israel and Palestine live side by side, and I believe in two-state solution. I don't care what the politicians say. I don't care what the presidents of this country say. I care of what I'm saying. I believe the Palestinian on both sides, on West Bank under Fatah, represented by the Mahmoud Abbas. On the other hand, in Gaza Strip is under the Hamas, represented by Rantisi. So the innocent are paying the price. The innocent are losing their life.
Which innocent?
The innocent inside Israel, inside Palestine, in Iraq, in America, in Afghanistan, and the rest of the world. Innocent are paying the price, not the leaders and not the politicians. Well, I hope this will come an end, because before the Palestinians need to get rid of their own occupation, inside themselves occupation, before to get rid of the Israeli occupation.
Who's their own internal occupation?
Which is the occupation by the Fatah movement and the Hamas movement. Those are the greatest and the largest politics and well-armed movement, whether either in the West Bank or in Gaza Strip. And we've seen on the TV screens how many innocent Palestinians on both sides, whether they represent Fatah or Hamas, they lost their life. Because we have to worship, like in any other Middle Eastern country, you have to pray to the president or to the governor, not to God, and not to be a human being. You have to kill your own brother in the name of Hamas or in the name of Fatah. That's what was going in the West Bank and in Gaza. And there's no end. No end, unfortunately.
Would you say it's a fascistic society there? Fascistic?
It's a corruption. And I put the blame on Arafat. Even now he's dead. And I'm saying it high and loudly. It's Arafat to blame. I won't put the blame on the occupation, the Israeli occupation. I won't put the blame on anybody else. It's on ourselves.
And is Abbas the inheritor of the corruption?
Yes, he's a part of this. And I wish that among the Palestinians, one day will come out and shows up a strong leader to put an end for this tragedy, as I said, because the innocent paying the price on the Palestinian side, on the Israeli side, and innocent paying the price through the Palestinian suicide bomber.
You think it's